عندي 106 سنين 106 سنين الحمد لله.
Hello, and welcome everybody to meet us on the Abraham Path. I'm Anisa Mehdi, Executive Director of the Abraham Path Initiative. API is a nonprofit organization dedicated to building bridges of communication in this part of the world, the Middle East, call it Southwest Asia. It's a region known more for conflict and hostility than it is for hospitable people and its spectacular walking trails. API's mission is to spotlight hospitality in Southwest Asia. How do we do that? Well, since 2007, we've been working with local partners to build over 2,000 miles of walking trail in the region. So travelers will walk from place to place, meeting one another, meeting local folks, and staying overnight in their homes. And that is the secret sauce for economic development in marginalized communities and fostering friendships across the challenging divides of our times. Nowadays, of course, we're also building pathways in cyberspace, and that's why you're all here today with us from places like London, Paris, Dusseldorf, Jerusalem, Sao Paulo, Indianapolis, Berkeley, and even Sulphur, Kentucky. Thank you for joining us. Our guest is David Baum, who I've known for almost as long as I've known API, and that goes back to 2007. As a management consultant and executive coach, David Baum's clients include folks like Jane Goodall, Oprah Winfrey, President Bill Clinton, and organizations like Women for Women International, General Electric, and Shell. So that's quite a range. But I'd say that management consultant and executive coach doesn't fully describe David's gift for listening and helping people untangle the knots we tie into our own lives. So we welcome David Baum from Peterborough, New Hampshire. How are you, David?
I'm wonderful. Thank you, Anisa, for having me. And thank you to John, who is our tech savior behind the scenes. It's a great pleasure to be here. I also want to specifically honor my walking brother and Abraham Path founder, William Ury, whose inspiration and passion for walking and talking has sparked me to greater vision and possibility. Much of what you're going to hear today was formed in our many walks together. And so it's a pleasure to have him on and to be here.
Yes, welcome, William. We're so glad you've joined us today. So David, you've got 2 PhDs, one in psychology from Temple University in Philadelphia, and the other in divinity from Naropa University in Boulder. And like many of us, you worked your way through graduate school. But you worked your way through graduate school in the circus. So we've got psychology, divinity, fire eating, juggling, and magic. How did that happen?
I think it happened, it's a great question. I think it happened when people ask me, how did my career evolve? It's generally been the same route. It's very much like a walk as I think about it. A walk in which, where they say the map is not the territory and you kind of just wander the pathway. It happened because I believe in the power of yes. And I believe very much in saying yes to most everything that came my way. And I also very much believe in the power of delight. And somehow the 3 of these things, I just always followed wherever the road led me in various directions. And though my mother can certainly never understand how this all fit together, by the end, she was quite proud of what I had accomplished and the unique way in which I had done it.
Well, I just love this photo of you entertaining and doing magic for a group of friends, new friends that we met when we were walking in Petra a few years ago. There's some more magic from David and some more brohood from David, and William and David together over a spectacular cliff, again on that walk in southern Jordan. Master of selfies. But aside from this personal connection, how does the power of walking connect to the Abraham Path Initiative?
Yeah, well, as I understand it, and I think William's great vision and dream is to bring people together in a sense of commonality and purpose. What is the shared purpose that we have, and then to see where the conversations go as we create connections. As you'll hear today, what I'm going to talk about is why walking is such an effective process. It's very old, it's very ancient, it's very much in our DNA, but there's something magical that happens when we walk that doesn't happen when we sit and talk. And that's what we're going to be exploring today.
Right, because we take walking for granted, don't we? We stand up, we walk somewhere, and it's not something we think about. So are you going to talk about this when you get to it? Like, how did walking capture your imagination as something different from other ways of being?
I think it's because it's a love of mine. I know that I'm preaching to the choir here. You're all going to be hearing things that are going to resonate or affirm what your passions are. But walking was always a passion. It was a passion for a variety of reasons, mostly because it slowed me down, because I move very quickly. It allowed me to focus. And there's different kind of walks, which we're going to be talking about today. And one of those walks is the walk we take with ourselves, which is less of what we're going to be looking at. But the other is when we walk in collective, or we walk in groups, or even if we walk with another. What is that about? And my world has always been, you referenced that I have a doctorate in psychology, and it's social psychology, which I tend to think of as a horizontal view of the world. I have a second doctorate in divinity, which I tend to think of as a vertical conversation. And walking and the path seem to be the perfect overlap space. It's the way that we connect people horizontally as we move forward, but it's also about connecting to something that is larger and has purpose and meaning. And in that regard, I found that walking is the perfect method, the perfect container, the perfect way to be able to bridge these worlds together.
Well, I think we're ready to dive in. So David, the screen is yours.
Thank you, and thank you all for coming, and greetings to you from my home in Peterborough, New Hampshire. My hope today is that as I talk, I'm going to be talking about the benefits of walking and a book that is in process called The 3 Walks. The hope is that I can talk for a bit, and then as a community I know of like-minded souls, without little need to convince, we can explore, talk through, and discuss how to deepen this idea, and can take as much from your wisdom as you can from mine. And my hope is whatever I tell you today, you're immediately going to be able to improve on as soon as this call is over. Because in the end, this is all about community and conversation. That's what the path says. And I believe if you get the structure right, the possibilities increase. As the phrase goes in Africa, if you want to go fast, walk alone. If you want to go far, you walk with others. And finally, I believe very much in the phrase by Meister Eckhart, who said, we change through delight. And I hope among many other things, this conversation today is both going to inspire you to even do more walking, but not just walking, but walking and being in conversation, and that there will be some delight. Now, the first photo that was shown, and the one that was a picture of me doing a magic trick. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to show you this particular magic trick today. So this is the magic trick that I used or I do oftentimes when I travel. And if there's any piece of advice that I can give anyone who travels overseas, it's learn 3 easy replicable magic tricks, because magic is really the way to create enormous sparks. So this is a trick I would do. I would pull out a bill, or I'd have someone show me a bill and you can see it. I'd have a pen and I'd take a pen and I'd stick it through the bill, and you could imagine people were just horrified, because in some countries, money and the destruction of money is really quite a taboo. And I would talk about the importance of finding a way through the impossible that would do no harm and create a whole. And so That was, I hope that brought a little delight to you. I know you weren't prepared today actually to see a magic trick. And this in and of itself is value add for this call. So let me start today with three favorite quotes. And there are three quotes that are going to frame essentially what I'm going to be talking about. So the three quotes are these. All great thoughts are conceived by walking. That's by Friedrich Nietzsche. Second quote, tell me with whom you walk and I'll tell you who you are. That is Ricardo Blanco. And then the third is by St. Augustine, the very famous quote, it is solved by walking. I find it completely appropriate that these three great minds in our history chose to focus on walking because walking, as my friend William once told me, is what defines us as human. We evolved around 4 million years ago as walkers. It's what made us human. This predated all other evolutionary changes, including an increase in brain size. It's impossible to say when full language appeared, but a reasonable guess is 200 to 300,000 years ago. Thus, walking predated all other important evolutionary changes, including an increase in brain size. Quite literally, walking as a species is in our genes. Now, I chose these three quotes quite specifically because they are a perfect entry to what I call the three walks. The first is the walk that we do by ourselves. It is the walk of introspection. All great thoughts are conceived by walking. The second is the walk we do with another. It is relational, one other. Tell me with whom you walk, and I'll tell you who you are. The third is the walk we take with a group, the walk of collaboration. It is solved by walking. It is this aspect that is the least understood and where organizations like the Abraham Path Initiative, I believe, have the greatest potential. Each has value, each has merit, and each should be considered whenever you seek clarity, connection, or wisdom. As a practitioner for over 35 years in high stakes conversations in 5 continents and in some very challenging parts of the world, including Northern Ireland, the Middle East region, Rwanda, Bosnia, and sometimes my own family, I have found in the trade that walking, this seemingly simple and often overlooked approach, can be a way to deepen our understanding to the challenges we face in life. Years ago, I was in Palo Alto, and as is my practice, I went for a morning walk to start my day. I was in a new neighborhood and saw another walker as soon as I left my host's home. It was a chilly morning and we were both in hats and layers and bundled up. And not wanting to get lost, I asked if I could join him. Sure, come along. And we spent an hour doing that walk and talk thing that I love so much. Family, Buddhism, weather, music, and deepest yearnings all flowed with our feet as we walked. You know, it was that kind of special serendipitous conversation you can have with a stranger where there are no limits or protections are needed. It was great. It was a deep, lovely conversation. Only until the very end did I ask, so, what do you do? I run a company, he said. A name I know? Probably Apple. My name is Steve. Was I ever humbled? But more importantly, I have always believed that because we were walking, we had a connection that could not have occurred in almost any other setting or at any other time. For the past 10 years, I have been exploring this subject of walking conversations by asking essentially 3 questions to anyone who will listen. First, and think about these 3 for yourselves. And think about, particularly as we go into the question and conversation point afterwards. First, do you feel that the quality of a walking conversation is different than a sitting one? I define quality as depth and meaning. Mostly, I ask people to raise their hands and most people say yes. Second, I would ask, why do you think that is? And I would get a myriad of different theories. And third, I would ask, how would you make a walking conversation more effective? And that's really where all of this work has taken me, the research. So through exploration, testing, and practice, and the research that already exists, a theory has started to emerge as to why walk if you want to enhance the effectiveness of your inner and outer conversations. We live in a hectic world, and increasingly our conversations are disembodied and truncated, taking place through the internet and cell phones. Advantages, yes, of course, in speed and knitting people together, but as technology accelerates, we are losing something very important. I believe, and I'm sure all of you believe, we are losing quality. Think of a band playing music. What happens if the drummer starts to speed up? The rest of the band naturally kind of falls in line and follows. That is us. We are the band, and technology is the drummer. Our conversations now are beginning to match our technology. Short, quick, and interrupted. Tweets replace dialogue. We are talking more, but listening way less. Don't get me wrong, I love technology. It's effective for quick dissemination of information. This call, for instance, is amazing, but alignment and discernment, nuance, not so much. Our never-ending passion for speed has come at a very high cost. As speed goes up, quality goes down, speed creates reactivity, and when we are reactive, we cannot right-size appropriate response. So here's the question. What if we could marry the best of the old, that we are a genetically encoded walking species, with the best of modern conversational approaches to creating a better life? Is that something worth doing? Of course it is. And that's why we're here. If there's one thing I've learned in 35 years of engaging people in conversation to solve big problems, it is that a balanced approach will often lead to a successful solution. And walking one foot in front of the other is a literal and figurative balanced approach. As Einstein once said, to keep your balance, you must keep moving. Let's explore these three walks. What do Thoreau, George O'Keeffe, Einstein, Wordsworth, Jane Goodall, Louisa May Alcott, Agatha Christie, James Joyce, who, by the way, wrote Ulysses entirely while walking around Dublin, and one could argue Moses, Buddha, Muhammad, Jesus, and of course, Abraham all have in common? When they needed big ideas or big breakthroughs, they all took themselves for a walk. As Thoreau wrote, the moment my legs begin to move, my thoughts begin to flow. This is the first walk, the one we take with just ourselves, the one with a long list of proponents, and one you most likely do. Its primary value is to settle, inspire, and ultimately clarify. The first walk's purpose is to calm the nervous system, which then allows the mind to explore without interruption or pressure. It is the walk for clarity. Yes, that's me, by the way, on one of my morning walks, being inspired. Thoreau, in his essay on walking, gives this account of the poet William Wordsworth. When a traveler asked the poet's servant to show him her master's study, she answered, "Here is his library. His study is out of doors." Stanford researchers Daniel Schwartz and Marilyn Opezzo found that students were on average 60% more creative when they were walking compared with others who sat while tackling similar cognitive tests. Writer Ferris Jabber describes this way: walking helps set the mind adrift on a frothing sea of thought. I love that. Set the mind adrift on a frothing sea of thought. When we go for a walk, the heart pumps faster, pushing more blood and oxygen to the brain. Our nervous system is activated, both through our feet, think reflexology, and in what we see and hear. Without thinking about it, we put a contemplative practice on autopilot, and we don't have to do anything special. We don't have to sit on a cushion or stare at anything. We just breathe. Walking on a regular basis promotes new cell connection, keeps brain tissue flexible and pliant, produces new cells in the hippocampus brain region, which is crucial for memory, and stimulates the growth of neurons while strengthening the transmission between them. If you could put the benefits of walking to a pill, you'd make a fortune. We'd all buy it. It isn't just that the brain is more active when walking. There is something specifically going on that boosts our creative juices by making our thinking more divergent as opposed to convergent. I recommend, by the way, a new book by Shane O'Mara called In Praise of Walking, if you're interested in the neuroscience. This is the walk all of us have taken, and the one that feels the most instinctive. It is also the one that is a form of meditation, and as such, brings many of the benefits of any meditation practice if we allow it. This leads us to the second walk, the walk with another. Its primary benefit is to connect. Here is a favorite clarifying story. It's Kenya in October, and it can be hot, especially if you're walking on the African savanna, the Masai Mara, in the middle of the day. I was traveling with Correa, a lovely Kenyan man of about 35, with a huge smile and an easy laugh. I was running a service learning retreat in Kenya, which offered an opportunity for attendees to walk for the day with a Maasai warrior. Our hosts were the International Youth Empowerment and Development Organization, WE. Correa and I were to spend half a day walking about 8 to 10 miles toward a gathering in a local community. He wore a shuka, the traditional Maasai long red checked wrap, and carried a spear, a bow, and a quiver of arrows, and a wooden club called a rungu. One important aspect of his work that day was to guide and protect me on our journey from snakes and lions and anything else unwanted that might come our way. As we discovered on our walk, we also shared an unspoken goal: to connect with each other, because it's across a divide of culture and language, but also many hours of walking. Correa spoke twice as much English as I did Swahili. Unfortunately, I speak only 10 words of Swahili and 1 word of Ma, his native language. No matter how enthusiastically I said, "Sopa," basically, "What's up?" it only got me so far. As we started out across the Kenyan plain, the prospect of an in-depth discussion seemed as distant as the faraway horizon. Initially, this is how it would go. We'd walk, then after a while, Correa would point, say something in Swahili or Ma. I couldn't tell the difference, and then mine. I'd shrug, look clueless. He'd smile helplessly, and we'd walk again. He'd try again. Same results. Then we'd walk a long time in silence. Stop, drink, walk some more, and I'd try from my end. He'd smile his big smile, which meant, "Sorry, I don't understand," and again, we'd walk. If I thought I understood a word or a short phrase, I'd keep repeating it as a sign of my growing linguistic abilities. At one point, I confused the word heart for breast, which was good for a huge laugh later in the day with our hosts, and Correa was way too polite at the time to stop me from basically saying his wife had ostensibly big hoo-has. At times, our walk was quiet, and at times it was energetic, and we exchanged comments and observations, even though it seemed that we couldn't really understand each other. Whatever else the conversation was, it was always moving. And as we moved, something magical began to happen. Regardless of the actual words we used, the essence of our connection began to deepen, and with it, our rudimentary conversation. At the end of our time, we gathered with other people from our travel group to share our experiences and introduce our new friends. When it came time for Correa to introduce me through a translator, he spoke eloquently about our deep connection, of all we learned about our families, and of his new great friend. He gave me my own personal Maasai name, which meant one who loves to walk and talk. That was my Maasai name, one who loves to walk and talk. I don't know how he did it. For me, that was real magic, but the guy totally got me. Correa understood me between the words and not because of them. I believe that walking allowed this to happen. Consider the following question. Would you like to go for a walk? Just take in for a moment what this simple request implies, what it says, how much it means, and how different it feels to you. Then, would you like to go for a cup of coffee, or would you like to go for a cup of tea? A walk implies time, and time for busy people is deeply meaningful. Think for a moment, how many times have you turned down the offer of a walk in your entire life? It starts the conversation right by just the invitation. It says, you are important to me. This is important to me. Yes, let's connect. The earliest root of the word walk is well, meaning to turn, best, twist, and roll. And that is what walking and talking does. In the act of moving forward together, something in our nature is affected. If we're lucky, we can be reshaped or deepened by the conversations. And that happens when we move. If we are really lucky, we can be transformed. Now, I'm not suggesting today the replacement of all sitting conversations with moving ones. Face-to-face is the way we live our lives, and that's largely how things get done, particularly for in-person conversations, whether at the family table, Zoom, or in meetings. Technology aside, we are a species that grew from seeing each other face-to-face. When it comes to communication, however, one thing is abundantly clear. We spend a lot of time doing it. Most of our days, in one form or another, we spend in expression. With the world growing in people, challenges, and complexity, a case can be made that of all the things we need to improve, the way we communicate, we talk to each other, the way we connect should be at the very top of our list. So, where would you rather conduct a meaningful conversation? This or this? This or this? Why is walking so effective for connecting with others? Here are a few of the many emerging possibilities. Number one, when we walk together, we talk side by side, which is inherently less aggressive than face-to-face. Side by side is way less threatening and thus way more effective, especially for tough conversations. For some, too much direct eye contact is threatening. So when eye contact is removed, the space in between just feels safer. Here's an example. Imagine we know each other, and I approach you at a cocktail party. While chatting, I slowly just lean into your side until we're lightly touching shoulders. I literally sidled up right next to you. My guess is you would probably feel okay about it. You might even actually like it. You certainly would probably not be threatened. Now imagine this. I come up to you at a cocktail party, and instead I approach you straight on. Oh, I get to do this on Zoom. This is so much fun. And I put my nose right on your nose. Wouldn't this trigger a very different response? Side by side feels more protected. And on some level, we are still animals with evolutionary instincts. So maybe it's because our vital organs are less exposed shoulder to shoulder, or avoiding the primal predatory trigger of the eye-to-eye challenge. Regardless of the biological or cultural reason, a conversation always goes deeper when both parties feel safe. Two, we become more emotionally open when we walk because we are more physically open. With no tables, no hunching, no legs crossed, no arms folded, we physically change into more of who we want to be, available and expansive. When conversations take this kinesthetic form, our openness to possibility increases. What was the secret to the Camp David Accords? The critical walks that Bacon, Carter, and Sadat took in various paired configurations. Three, I believe we listen better when we walk. Most behavioral psychologists believe that 65 to 80% of all communication is nonverbal. But words matter. When you remove nonverbal communication from the equation because you are looking straight ahead or watching the path in front of you, you are forced to listen to your colleague, to your partner, not just to what is being said, but how. The result, nuance, tone, pace, all seem tightened. 4, and I think this is actually one of the most important. When we are in a walking conversation, it brings in what Cicero called the great art of conversation, silence. Most of us think better when we have space. In a sitting conversation, it's a rare person who can be comfortable after, say, maybe 5 seconds of silence. I mean, just think about it. You're in a conversation and all of a sudden it stops and you're just sitting there looking at each other. 1, 2, 3, 4. We start to get pretty nervous and we'll oftentimes come in. But walking, because there are other things to look at, because we're in motion, because of all of those factors, creates an implicit contract that if we start together, we finish together. It is a metaphor, side by side, moving in a common direction on a journey with the element of the unknown. Finally, the new and expanding field of brain science offers very interesting possibilities. Body movement, whenever we move, triggers bilateral brain functioning, which enables creativity and expansive thinking. Just being outside with its changing environment has impacts on the brain. Fresh air and the possibility of nature all help with freedom of thought and broadness in perspective. The outside world is always in flux when we're in it, with stimulation and movement triggering our brains that the inside world can never give us. And this allows us to be more active and energetic. As we walk, even the simple act of looking at a far off horizon will take the mind to a new way of thinking. It's why neuroscientists and ergonomic specialists recommend that if you sit and stare at a computer all day, periodically stand up, go to a window and look to the farthest point you can see. Looking farther actually helps us to think farther, outside the proverbial box, with greater possibilities of creative vision, followed by greater fit by this physical change. It resets our brains to become more expansive, with a calmer emotional state as a result. Now, this finally leads us to the third and final walk, walking with a group. Its primary value is collective wisdom. Now, the purpose of evolution is survival, and thus, for survival, we did this together. As a species, we did this together. And groups and families, we learned to walk together, even before we learned to talk together. Collective walking led to collective knowledge and our progress as a species. It is how we populated the planet. Group walking versus sitting can have many benefits. So let me talk about these, because this is really the least explored aspect of walking and conversation. First, power and size get equalized. And in a sitting meeting, oftentimes groups will move at the pace of the fastest thinkers. Think about a conversation you're in. People are firing off ideas. But walking, by necessity, moves and must move at the pace of the slowest member, the physical slowest member, which by its nature will create inclusion and engagement. As I learned from a dear friend, Jerry White, Nobel Peace Prize laureate for his work in landmine survivorship and eradication and former executive director of API, by moving physically, we can all change mentally. This is because, from a psychological perspective, the mental context shifts when we walk and talk together. We find a workable pace for all members, with physical differences of size or political power mitigated by the side-by-side status of the conversation. One nuanced developing theory I have is this: a face has 43 muscles in it. Side by side, we eliminate from sightline the potentially influential force of negative nonverbal feedback. So I was talking about how much we transmit nonverbally. Well, when we are in a conversation where you can't see someone's face, it's not just the affirmations that you might miss, that you have to listen more carefully to. You also don't miss the myriad of sort of subtle nonverbal shutdowns that also occur in a conversation. Therefore, I believe, and I've had experience with the notion that ideas may thus go further, or conversations endure, because we can't see a frown or a look away that would shut down our thinking. Many, I believe, a tough issue has been resolved or innovation sparked because people just hung in there and kept talking for no other reason that neither party saw a reason to stop. Last thought. Most meetings are time-bound, meaning that we operate within the confines of a clock. So when you got, for instance, an invitation to this, it put it in your calendar in a 1 hour block, or when you put something in your calendar, it's a half-hour block. But a walk, it's informed by distance. You don't just stop in the middle of a walk, you have to complete it. That in and of itself can affect our thinking. Change the container for a conversation, and you change the conversation itself. The companies like Apple and LinkedIn encourage collective walking meetings. It is less often done and less often written about because it takes more planning, or at least it's very unfamiliar. A simple way when walking with a group is to behave the way our hunter-gatherer ancestors did, which is to fluidly move between the three walks that I've just talked about of self, other, and collective. It is what I'm experimenting with in facilitating conversations with my clients. You do this by always making sure that you have built in solo time, paired time, and integration time as a group to collect insights and learnings. By weaving these three together, you gain the best that each of these walks can offer. William and I call this the circle, arrow, circle approach. It starts this way, and this is the recommendation. Start with an opening assemblage of people bringing people together of why we are here and what we intend to do together. So you start with a circle. It is the opening circle. Then offer a question and have participants walk by themselves, the solo walk, spending time gathering their thoughts. This is the opening arrow. After some time, then gather for the second circle. Share the initial insights, put people in pairs, give them a question to focus on, walk together and talk with their partners. This is the second arrow. After maybe 20 minutes, gather as a group, the next circle, collect the walking highlights, discuss implications, create the next question, pair people with someone new, and start again. Wash, rinse, repeat. 4 or 5 cycles, and you can end up at a pretty amazing place that sitting just doesn't allow. So in conclusion, before we move to conversation, with all kinds of walks that I'm doing, I would like you to keep in mind these 3 very important guiding principles. 1, always, no matter which walk you're doing, always start with the self walk, because a calm mind is necessary for a deeper conversation. 2, remind yourself to always enter with your heart, because walking conversations are intended to connect your head to your feet. And the through line between your head and your feet is the heart. And 3rd, finally, allow the conversation to evolve too much of an agenda, because the creative mind is always looking for the unexpected, which walking promotes. Look instead, as in any path, for the new possibilities outside of what a driven agenda would be. I leave you with this final thought before we go into conversation. The next time you have an important conversation that you need to have, ask yourself the question that William always asks. Rather than just talk it out, should we walk it out? You could meet at a conference table or a coffee table, but why would you? No chairs, no tables, no walls, only the path. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Lot to think about there. My goodness. We have a board meeting coming up and I'm already thinking about that. Before I go to the questions in the chat, let me just ask William if you have anything you'd like to add here.
I just want to say bravo, David. And yeah, it's beautiful the way you've compiled this and used it and spoken about it in such an inspiring way. And that's, to me, particularly as we go down the technological route here, as a major way in which we're communicating. I had another friend once who coined the phrase, high tech, high touch. As high tech as you go, we need more. We need to touch the earth. We need to be in contact with each other, and walking to me is kind of the perfect complement to the high tech world. Walking was our origin as a species, and it may be our salvation as a species.
That's a good one to think about. And there's no time like now to be thinking about the salvation of our species.
No.
David, you have anything to say to William on that one?
No, except I love your new kitchen.
Great. Well, let's go to this question that came in from Jay Rothman. He asks you, David, have you used synchronized walking? Walking in silence where parasympathetic nervous systems synchronize. Can you describe that and give examples how you use that, if you've used that?
I haven't. I love it. And who asked that question?
Jay Rothman. Jay, would you like to unmute yourself and engage with the
I'd love to hear a little bit more. Please tell me more.
I actually just discovered it recently, and I used it in a mediation I did last week between two brothers, and it was getting very intense. And then it switched. It switched to a conversation about their past. And we took a break, and I said, now walk up in the field behind my office. You can take the 10-minute walk or the 5-minute walk. And they said 5 minutes. And I said, now don't say anything to each other. Just find your steps in common. Walk your footfalls the same place, same time, and think about what we just talked about that was meaningful. And they came back, and it really changed. They said to me, I asked them, so what came up? And one of the brothers said, I remembered being his brother. And the idea is just the simple act of walking together in silence and having the parasympathetic nervous system fire will foster that resonance. I just read about it quickly and I experimented with it, but I know very little about it, except for that my one experiment was a great success.
I think it's fabulous. I haven't heard of it. I'm going to, someone once said, when you're in this world, it's not that I'm stealing your work, it's just that your work will live on in mine. I'm going to take this and try it actually next week with a client. So
wonderful. I want to hear how it goes. Yeah, thanks.
And by the way, I would love to have anyone who has other thoughts and ideas. I'd love to keep this conversation going if there's a way, just to hear all that this has sparked and how to make this better for my book. So if you can send me anything, I will engage in a conversation with you at david@davidbaum.com just to see what your research and experience tells you.
Hi, my name is Miriam Sear, and hi, we have a house in Holderness, New Hampshire, so not far from you. I'm a theater director, and I was an actress for many years. And one of the first things you do when you're a young theater student is you learn to walk in synchronicity. But not only do you so you do it in a circle, and you have to start walking like the other person to get in sync with people in your space. And it's one of the most powerful acting exercises that you're taught as a young actor. And so I just wanted to share, in terms of synchronicity, it's one of the first things you learn as an actor is to walk in sync. And then there's another acting exercise that's a really cool acting exercise that involves walking as well, is you will have platforms and you have to balance your space. So if someone walks up a platform, you have to walk down a platform. If someone walks across, you have to counter with an X, so that you're constantly rebalancing the space around you through walking. And it is an incredibly powerful exercise. Anyway, I just wanted to share that.
That's so great. Thank you. And I get up to your part of the world. I go to Holderness quite a bit on Squam Lake to visit my friend Gary and Meg. And who knows, maybe we'll run into each other in the store sometime. I think that's lovely what you said, and what I think about is the fact that the body has a wisdom that the mind will never be able to fully understand, and the idea of synchronizing as the primary method by which we connect and balance ourselves by using the body and the wisdom that is there, and then what gets revealed. Like, I remember that we're brothers. I'm going to try this as soon as I possibly can. I may even do this with my wife later today. I think it's fabulous. And when I was worked my way through graduate school in a circus, I did a lot of theater, and we did mirroring exercises, Miriam, which I'm sure you know and have done many over the years. But this idea
Yes.
of tracking another, being aware of another's walk, that you know, the expression, you have to walk a mile in somebody else's shoes. That's what we're doing.
There's
And
the 17th century Italian players used to do that, and Molière learned a lot from them. And he has this fantastic a saying that says, "Le cœur a ses raisons que la raison ne connaît pas," which means the heart has its reasons that the reasons cannot tell, and or does not know. And the only way you access the heart is through walking, through movement. So
beautiful,
yeah.
beautiful. Thank you. Wonderful contribution to you both, actually, to you and Jay. Thank you.
Paul Dobinson offers this question, and it kind of tails in. So your heart is going to go with you everywhere. But his question is, does it matter where you walk? Do you have to plan that?
You know, this is a very interesting conversation to be had, and it really is. There's actually some debate on this. So instinctively, I will give you what my answer is, and then I'll tell you the research, which there's some research out there that says it actually doesn't matter. So I believe that actually, for reasons that I think are important, it does matter. I think it matters that you're outside. I think it matters that you're around stimulation for what it does for the brain. I think it matters for all of the things that I've talked about. Specifically, imagine if you're on a walk, one of the things that happens is and you're outside somewhere in nature, or you're around people, you also get the introduction of the unfamiliar and the surprise element. So for instance, if I'm having a conversation with someone in a meeting room, I am focused on this individual in the conversation, but I am not impacted by anything that's on the walls or what's happening in the room, nothing. But I've been on meaningful conversations with folks, and we've been outside and we're walking, and a woman was coming the other way, pushing a baby, and we got out of the way, and I said, look at that beautiful child. Do you have children? And then all of a sudden we had a deeper connection because I was able to follow the threads of what showed up. So I do believe it actually matters. I do believe that when we are in the natural world, conversation is deepest and most meaningful when it is slow to medium. And that's what the natural world is. Most of the things that happen in the natural world happen in slow to medium, except if there's danger. And so when we are in the natural world, when we're walking in nature, we are in fact synchronizing our step and our pace with the pace of nature. And I think that allows for a kind of depth that is really important. Now, that said, there's some new studies that are out where they've been testing. Does it matter if it's outdoors? Does it matter if it's indoors? At least in creative brainstorming and thought. And the initial studies are, no, it's actually just the process of moving your body that matters. But I still hold to the belief that it really matters where you are. And of course, that also means making sure that the place you pick to walk is not going to be too challenging unless that's what you're looking for in the conversation, and that you don't have to constantly be looking down. That also matters to manage your feet. But I'd love to hear what other people think.
I have a question. It's from California. I'm thinking Bill Ury's book, Getting to Yes, could be applied to what we're talking about always. But my question is, as a psychotherapist, that part of me, there's something in the teaching that it's rather negative to take your client for a walk, that it's too personal. But often I feel that would be the best way to do the therapy with the person or to converse with the person who's a client. And I wondered if you had anything to say about it, because that's a big, big field of people sitting and talking to one another rather than walking.
I have to tell you, I think, and I speak as someone who's been trained in psychology, I think it's a mistake. I don't agree. I don't subscribe to that thought. I understand the aspects of detachment, but I would also say that one of the great benefits that walking has, as we've talked about, is connected to one of the approaches, the most famous approach in psychotherapy, which is analysis, where we have the patient lying on a couch, not having eye contact with their therapist. It allows for kind of a detachment that allows for a freer access to feelings. So I am of the mind that as long as we are careful as therapists to do our role, that the personal has a place. I believe that the physical has a place. And I believe that walking has a value and an access that sitting conversations often can't have. It's a little bit, I actually believe it's a little bit, and I'm not conflating the two, but it's a little bit like the conversation that is happening in the therapeutic world about the use of medicinals and therapeutics like MDMA and things like that. There's a big discussion, the conversation is going on. And I think that walking is going to, and that is, there's more work to be done, but I do believe that the initial impression of you never use drugs with a patient, we're challenging that now. And the initial thinking of that you would never walk with a patient, I think that is open for discussion as well. William, what does getting to yes say about this one?
I don't know if it says anything. I would simply say this, that just to reinforce what David is saying, is that I believe walking is incredibly therapeutic. All those 3 walks that David was suggesting, and that I wonder if the taboo on walking with your client goes back to days, the origins of psychology, psychoanalysis, where there's a real hierarchy, between the therapist and the client. Because I think walking is profoundly equalizing when you walk together side by side. But I also think it's profoundly humanizing. And I could imagine a new field, walking therapy, therapists who specialize in walking with their clients. And may not be for everybody, but I think it could be a breakthrough.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that. And also, just as an idea, remember, if we go back way, 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 and we go back to the Greeks, peripatetic learning of a teacher and a student, that they walked together. That was where learning really came from, was the core of great education. So I think there's discussions to be had on this. And of course, there are discussions to be made as we're walking.
We have a question from Rose Wang. Rose, please.
Thank you, Anisa, and thank you, David, for the great inspiration. I just feel really resonate with so many aspects of what we already mentioned, and especially with the learning part. That's always been my my thirst for learning and regeneration, and I just found that is really profound, and how we bring walking with in conversations and with that shared presence with each other, and that's just beautiful to be embodied in nature and with each other. I just felt that really being missed during the pandemic, with the lockdowns, and that was really a part that I've been missing in nature, moving from the countryside to the city, and yeah, and feeling that really holding a lot of potentialities to transform our perceptions to be who we are at the core of our being, and that being of freedom, well, the freedom of being and embodiment, that's really really speaks to me. I appreciate it. Thank you.
That is a lovely way to end, and a beautiful sealing of this conversation. And you do have raised the pandemic, which we really haven't talked about, but how many of us, particularly those of us that have lived in cities, particularly those of us who are in Europe or other parts of the world who have been in serious lockdown. It's been very interesting to connect with my friends all over the world as things have begun to open up. And I would ask, what is the first thing you're going to do as things start to change? I'm going for a walk. It was amazing to see how much that was part of people's therapeutic process.
Well, we're going to go for a walk right now. David, you want to switch your technology?
Yes.
We're going to go from the computer screen to out of doors and join David, who is a passionate gardener. And he's going to treat us to a tour of his garden to end our program today. So
Yes.
I'll conclude by saying, on behalf of William Ury and Oliver Pospisil and our other board members who are on the call, thank you very much for joining us today on Meet Us on the Abraham Path. I'm Anisa Mehdi. I look forward to seeing you again on July 15th. We have Joseph Green, an archaeologist from Harvard, who will join us to talk about legends of the Dead Sea. There you are. Very good. Hi, David.
This is so great. Okay, here we go.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to flip my camera around. Here we go. Little taste of where I am. To live in a beautiful place on the water, which you can see. Sit out with my morning coffee, my home. And now I want to just give you a very brief tour of my garden, and then a special place of homage to William. So a little bit of the garden as I walk through it. If any of you are avid gardeners, you will appreciate all that we are creating here. And then as we move to this special little section here, it's the sacred part of the garden. It's the path. And and here we go. So years ago, I had commissioned stepping stones with a favorite poem put on it. And it is a poem that to me represents what the path truly is. And it's a poem by my favorite poet, Jalaluddin Rumi. And the poem goes this way. Out beyond the world, of right doing, and wrongdoing, there is I will meet you there. So for me, that's what the path is. The path, the Abraham path, is the path that is the field that brings people together in conversation. And with that, I bid you all goodbye. Go for a walk sometime today. Thank you so, so much for everyone for being here.
Bye, everybody.